If there's one thing that you could take away from this movie is that Peter Jackson loves carrots. I mean, he just adores them. Hey guys, David here. The second chapter in the Hobbit trilogy, which was originally not a trilogy, has arrived in the form of The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. Smaug. Apparently it's pronounced Smaug. I've been pronouncing it Smaug this whole time, so I felt like an idiot. It's Smaug. Smaug. And much like how The Two Towers did for Frodo and the Fellowship, The Desolation of Smaug follows Bilbo and his band of fellow dwarves in their quest to take back Erebor from the dragon Smaug. Well, at the same time, Gandalf decides to go on his own and investigate a certain evil that is lurking in the shadows, ready to attack. All while Bilbo deals with the power bestowed upon him by the One Ring that he found during his confrontation with Gollum in the previous movie. Now, much like Two Towers, this is the second installment in the trilogy, which means that this is that middle part that does not introduce the story but doesn't conclude the story either, or at least doesn't approach it in that sense. It's just that second half where it's kind of like the same kind of beat from beginning to end. So I was going into the movie expecting that, and sure enough it ended up being that, where you have our main characters going from point A to point B, and then to point C, and then to point D, and I wasn't let down by that. I was expecting that. What I was a little bothered by was that there were moments where it kind of started to repeat itself. I couldn't count the amount of times that the dwarves got captured by somebody and then brought forward to a higher up, and that higher up says, "Oh, you are so-and-so, you're Thorin, you're the guy from the legend," and that happens just so many times in this movie. Probably more so in this movie than in the first one. And that repetition kind of carries on over to the climax, to where there were just certain things happening over and over. I mean, I don't know how many times, and you know by the trailer that Smaug appears in the movie. But I was surprised by the amount of times that Smaug would slither around while Bilbo is just right under him, wondering if he was ever going to get caught. This has happened so many times during the climax that I was starting to speculate, and I don't know this for sure, because I'm not some person on the set, I'm not some actor, I'm not some extra, I'm not an expert on the production of these movies. But my guess is that it was during that moment in the climax, to where I started to see things happening over and over, that I started to feel that I think it was at that point where the movie started to drag itself a little bit, because this was originally going to be 2 movies instead of 3, and they went ahead and put in some extra stuff in that climax to have it be at least within the same relative running time as the other movies, which is around 2 hours and 45 minutes or so, because you know how Peter Jackson loves them long movies. A 3-hour King Kong movie. Who wanted that? The movie was good. I just 3 hours, and I started to feel that just a little bit towards the end, because I feel like that was the point where the third movie is actually supposed to begin, but because they didn't want that just yet, and they wanted a suitable part in the story to end this second movie, they kind of dragged it on just a little bit. But if there's one thing that I accepted and won me over about 15-20 minutes into the movie, was that this is a lighter tone. You know, this is not going to be Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is darker in tone, it's much more serious, it has an awful lot of more mature elements in it. The Hobbit is meant to be more of a lighthearted adventure. It's not supposed to take itself too seriously. This is supposed to be like a fable, because, I mean, that's the tale of Bilbo Baggins. So Peter Jackson and the writers decided to approach this with a lighter tone. And about 15-20 minutes into that, I got reminded of that from the first movie. And I'm going to go ahead and be one of those people that were just a little bothered by the lighter tone, thinking to themselves like, oh man, this is not the Lord of the Rings that I remember from the early 2000s, where we were all just taken by surprise by the fact that people were actually able to make movies out of these books. With this, after 15 minutes of remembering that lighter tone from the first movie, I accepted it. And after accepting it, I had fun. I had fun throughout the entire movie, because despite how I just said that towards the end it started to drag itself a little bit by repeating some of the same things, at least repeating some of the similar situations between Bilbo and Smaug, I had fun till the very end. It was almost like I accepted Christianity, you know, I'm like saved. It was almost the same thing. After accepting that this movie is supposed to be much more fun and much lighter in tone than the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, I had fun all the way with it. Commenting on the way the movie is filmed, as well as the performances for the actors, feels a little redundant to do, because this was filmed back to back with the first and the upcoming third movie. So I'm going to go ahead and just say that everybody did a great job. Peter Jackson with the directing, Martin Freeman as Bilbo Baggins, Ian McKellen as Gandalf, and everybody who played the dwarves, they were all fine. Orlando Bloom, who plays Legolas once more, and he was also good. I haven't read the book, but I do know from people that Legolas was not in the story for The Hobbit, but they went ahead and put him in there anyway, probably because he was a popular character. But he still ended up being a cool character, and quite the badass, chopping orcs' heads and shooting arrows through their heads. He was pretty cool. And his presence in the movie didn't just feel jam-fisted in there. It didn't feel like, oh, Legolas is a cool character, let's just put him in there and have him just do a bunch of crazy stuff. It felt like it didn't feel like he needed to be there, but it felt suitable for him to be there, and it felt welcome. But then you got also other characters, new characters introduced into the story, such as Lee Pace, who plays the Elf King, who was such a dick. But he's supposed to, and he did a good job. And then you got Evangeline Lilly. I always get her name wrong. Evangeline Lilly, I believe she's in Lost, and she was really good too. She was actually much more likable than the previous elven female protagonist from the previous Lord of the Rings trilogy, which was Liv Tyler. I don't know, Liv Tyler has always been very foofy to me. Just, I don't know, like, the way she talks, it's just so... I was never a fan of that. So to have this girl come in and play a new female lead protagonist of the elvish descent, she ended up being a much more likable character, and I love seeing her on screen. And just everybody did a good job. My only complaint about the dwarves would be that about half, maybe even more, hardly had any screen time in this movie. I mean, they had enough time in the first movie for us to look at them and be like, okay, that's that dwarf, that's that dwarf. The only dwarves that you get to spend enough time with would be, of course, Thorin, the older dwarf, Keely. The others just pass by the screen, and whenever you see them, you're like, oh hey, it's that one from the first movie. But other than that, you really don't get to know them that very well. And speaking of likable characters, Luke Evans comes in here as Bard, and he was one of the more likable characters. I really enjoyed seeing him on screen. And just everybody did a good job, and the cinematography is good, the art direction, bringing Middle Earth back to life, that was really good, and the visual effects were also better. I actually thought that this movie was a lot less effects heavy than the first movie. I mean, yeah, here you got giant spiders, the orcs, and of course Smaug, the dragon himself, but apart from that, they were spread out throughout the movie that they kind of didn't take away from the movie. In the first movie, there were several scenes where they just had an awful lot of CGI, and an awful lot of those characters that were computer generated, they almost didn't really have to be. There could have been people in costumes, and that would have made it a lot more real. Here, I still retain that opinion a little bit, especially with the orcs. Like, they could bring back those, I know they're not orcs, they're another kind of breed whose name escapes me at this moment, but those evil soldiers from the original Lord of the Rings trilogy they're all like black and they have the teeth and everything, those were real people in costumes. I really wish that they would bring that back in the form of orcs in this movie, instead of just having them all CG, and you can kind of tell, especially seeing in 3D, that they're CG. I mean, for little kids it'll be a little more believable, but for me, I'm like, I still wish these were people in costumes. But the effects for the rest of the movie are great, and especially for Smaug, who I think would have been a great addition to as a mod for Skyrim. I think that would have been awesome. Somebody needs to get on that. A Smaug mod for Skyrim. Do it. Do it now. And the action sequences are great as well. In fact, better. And of course, I cannot go on with this review and leave my talk about the action sequences behind without mentioning, in great honor, the barrel scene. The barrel scene in this movie. A lot of people were predicting that the barrel scene was going to be good from the trailers. Like, people were looking at those little snippets in the trailers and thinking to themselves, that looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And not only did it end up being an awful lot of fun, but it stuck with me after watching the movie. I kept thinking back to that scene and how awesome it was. It's been a while since I've seen a movie that made me feel like I was on a theme park ride, and that barrel scene was just that. It was awesome. It had several shots where it would look like an awful lot of fun being in those barrels, while at the same time you have Legolas and eventually Lily's character, I can't remember her name, jumping all over the place, shooting down orcs with their arrows, and having the dwarves in the barrels fighting off more orcs. And just the choreography within the scene is just amazing. I was just taken away. I felt like a little kid in my seat again. Disneyland, Universal Studios, I don't care. Somebody needs to make a ride out of this thing. Profit. right there. And yes, the center of all of Hollywood's existence throughout this entire year, Benedict Cumberbatch is good as Smaug. His voice is really good. Of course, you can kind of tell that they altered it digitally, but I don't think they really altered it that much. I mean, it's not Hugo Weaving from Transformers where anybody could have done that. Here, you hear some of the things that he does with his voice in Smaug's voice. Even though, like I said, they probably added just a thin layer of digital trickery to his voice, you can still tell that it's actually his. And he really did make that character come alive. As for the Necromancer, I kind of wish that we could have seen a little bit more. He voices that too, but I wish that maybe they would have done something with his face to where it looks all demonic or something, but they didn't do that, and I kind of wish they would have done that, but oh well. But like I said, after accepting the lighter tone, I had an awful lot of fun with this movie, and I like the characters a little bit more, especially the ones that were already established in the first movie and that we got to see more of in this movie, even though a good majority of them were about half of the dwarves that we got introduced in the first movie. But to replace that, we got these other characters, some of them more likable, such as Evangeline Lilly's character and Luke Evans' character. And we also got an awful lot of great action sequences, in particular the barrel scene, which I think is so far the best scene in the entire series, including the first movie. And there's also other things that I could talk about that I don't want to get too much into because of spoilers. I'll go ahead and just briefly mention them after I give my score. But if I were to go ahead and give you guys just one more delightful spoiler-free nitpick, I'm sorry, I'm morbid like that, is that there were moments in the movie, actually several moments, where an awful lot of convenient things happen. Things that I'm like, why would that character be at that certain spot during this particular situation? I mean, it just feels too good to be true. But along with that, I think to myself, David, just have fun with it. You accepted the fact that this is a lighter in tone, so you gotta accept the fact that you gotta suspend your disbelief somewhat during this particular situation to have fun with it, and I did that. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug, an 8.8 out of 10, which is a B+. Now on to the spoilery stuff. It's not a whole lot. It's literally just a couple of things. In fact, just one major thing, and that is the shift of attention from Bilbo playing around with the ring at the beginning to him playing it around with it with almost no repercussion. I really, really loved the portrayal of him using the ring at the beginning of the movie, especially when they're going through the forest and they're going on this major trip. I thought it was actually really well executed. I felt like I was on the trip with him, especially the part that got embedded into my memory the most is when Bilbo's walking forwards, but then he looks down on the ground and his feet are walking backwards. I was like, oh, that's weird, and that's some really good trickery there done by Peter Jackson. I salute you, sir. But in the scene, he's toying with the ring, and there's a moment where he loses the ring, and it's under this creature, and he kills the creature to get the ring. We know for a fact that Bilbo probably wouldn't have killed that creature if it wasn't for the ring. I mean, in the first movie, yeah, he seemed to be, trying to fend off Gollum with the sword, but he's probably never going to use it. He's never going to actually go ahead and kill something, let alone someone. Here, he went to the extent to actually kill, in somewhat of a savage way, this spider thing, which is a good call because this thing was probably going to hurt him. But the fact that he went on it like crazy, like aggressively, just to get a ring, kind of spoke to him. And I really liked the subtlety in the beginnings of his transformation to knowing what this ring can do and what kind of corruption it comes with it, especially when it looks like he's gagging, but me knowing what me as well as the rest of the people who I haven't read the book. I'm gonna go ahead and put that out there. I haven't read the book, but I follow the Lord of the Rings movies, and I know that after a while, a particular word starts to build up in your throat when you have possessed the ring long enough. And I love how that word was kind of itching at his throat when he was holding the ring, and he was like, ugh. And we know what that word is. But then about halfway through the movie, especially after the barrel scene, they kind of drop that, and he's just putting the ring on like nothing. Yeah. I kind of wish that they kind of hinted at it just one more time. Not actually have him go crazy or anything. That's probably going to be saved for the third movie. But I wish that, like, for example, when he's talking to Smaug in the chamber with all the gold, he would have dropped the ring, and it wouldn't have rolled off into some obscure area like almost any small object in this movie does. I mean, when he kicks the key and it's bouncing off, seemingly off the cliff, I'm like, God, come on. Come on. And like I said, another convenient moment. Thorin manages to step on it, and the dwarves come back. But anyways, I would have loved to have seen that ring drop into the gold, and because it's also gold plated, it would have been lost within his vision. And I mean, it's pretty easy to be able to lose a ring, even if you just simply dropped it without having it actually bounce off anywhere. It would have been lost within his vision because everything is gold. I mean, I have a tablecloth on my dinner table that is red and green because it's Christmas, and I lost a twisty tie that is green on that table somewhere. I don't know where the hell it went, but it's somewhere in there, and I don't know where it went, and I lost it. So if I could lose a green twisty tie within a green and red tablecloth, I'm pretty sure that Bilbo could have lost the ring briefly right under his nose within the gold that he's standing upon. And I would have loved if he had dropped it, and he's like, no, and he's panicking, he's looking through it. And when he's looking through it, he starts to get a little aggressive, like he starts to look in his eyes that, this is like crack to him at this point. I would have loved to have seen that little bit at the end there, but there wasn't, and like I said, he was just conveniently putting the ring on and off, and I would have loved to have seen that start of the twisting of his soul because of the corruption of the ring. Chances are we're going to see that in the third movie because, I mean, we already got Smaug on his way to destroy that town by the end, so what else could the third movie be except for 2.5 hours of this giant battle, which for some people would be awesome, but for me, I could do with simply just a 30-minute battle. And that's it for my brief spoiler talk of The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos, and as always, take care.